Hello and welcome back to another video in the web dev series, the complete web dev series, where it is my goal to take you from a complete beginner to a job-ready developer. Now, if you're just joining us in this chapter, welcome. Just make sure you have some basic understanding of object-oriented programming and PHP and basic web development experience. This is the 8th video in this chapter, so if you're just finding me now on YouTube, make sure you at least go back to the beginning of this series. And please comment, like, subscribe if you like what you're seeing here. And let's get going. Where we finished off in the last video is we had started our router method to route our function. So what we want to do in this video is take the URL and split it out to where we can dynamically build out, instantiate our controller classes, and run the method inside a controller class that we intend to run. So without any further ado, I'm going to switch over to my screen. Make sure you have XAMPP up and running, and I'm actually going to create a new branch real quick. So git checkout-b. We are on video 8. You don't have to follow along with that, but I just wanted to make sure that I get this change just on this branch. So if you get stuck, look for the branch v8 in my GitHub repository. I will leave a link to the full application on GitHub in the description below. Now, where we left off in the last video is we had this router function that we had started, or this route method rather, and what I'd like to do is just kind of build that out a little bit. So we have URL kind of passed in here. So above this, what I'm going to do is we have our URL, and remember that this URL is a string. So again, let's just var dump that URL string so that we can kind of keep track of what we're doing here. And inside this blog controller, or inside this controller, I'm going to get rid of this var dump there. So inside the parent controller class, that way we're not confused about what is being dumped to the screen here. And I'm going to hit refresh. So we have this string here that's blog/index. Now remember, we want this blog part to be the controller that's instantiated, the class, and then we're going to call the index action, which will be a method in there. So let's go ahead and just create that real quick so that if we do happen to manage to do this, we know we've done it. So let's create a public function here. So this will be a method, a public method, and we're going to call this index and then action. Make sure the action is uppercase there. And what we're going to do here is let's just die here, and we're going to put you made it to the index action. All right. So if we make it there by the end of this video, if we get this to show up, the next thing that we want to do here is we want to do public, and let's just do function, and instead of index, let's do I don't know, foo action. And here we're going to die, and we're going to say you made it to the foo action. Now if we can do both of these things from the URL by the end of this video, like it calls this method and calls this method, we are doing really, really well. So let's go ahead now and let's jump back into our router class. And what I want to be able to do is at the very top here, we want to turn this string in. So this string that we var dumped here, we want to turn that to an array so that we can split it. And we want to split it by this / right here. Okay, so this will have two elements in the array. I want blog to be the first element and index to be the next element. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's create a variable called URL parts, and we're going to set that equal to, and we're going to use the PHP explode function, which takes a string and turns it to an array. But we need to know what to separate it by, so we're going to separate it by the /, and then we're going to pass our URL right into that. The next thing that we can do now, and I want to call this URL parts, and then we're going to var dump instead of the URL, we're going to var dump URL parts. Go ahead and hit save. And now when I do this instead of a string, you'll see that we have an array that has two elements. The first element is blog, the next element is index. So what we want to be able to do is take our controller from the first element of that array. So let's go ahead now and let's just do controller here. And what we want to do is we want to make sure we're handling the case where like they're just going to the index right here. So what if they go just here? Well, now we have an empty array with just one empty string, right? That's no good. So what we want to be able to do is we're going to set up a configuration here. So we're going to call our controller, and we're going to do a ternary operator. We're going to say, hey, if empty. Now remember, we're using our URL parts, and we have that first element of that array. So if that's empty, not empty, then the controller is going to be equal to URL parts 0. So the first element in the array. Else, so we do a colon here, else the controller will be equal to our config get, and then we're going to get our default underscore controller from our config file. So if it's not set, it's going to use what's in our config file. So let's go ahead now and look at the config file, and we have our default controller, and it's going to end up being blog. Okay, so now that we have blog, if it's default, it's just gonna, or we don't put anything, it's gonna default to blog, and we'll double check that in a moment. And actually, let's just go ahead and do that. So we have this controller here, so I'm gonna, underneath that controller part, let's var dump controller, because I want to show you every step along the way. All right, so if I refresh now, the controller is equal to blog, and that's because we didn't go anywhere. But if I put something else here, like something else, literally, we'll do that, then this is, the controller name is going to be looking for something else. Okay, but I'm going to go ahead and set this to blog and then index. Okay, I don't need the rest of that on there for now. All right, so then what we're going to be able to do is we have the controller set here, and let's go ahead and make sure that it's uppercase. So what we're going to do is let's set up a variable called controller name, and we're just going to set that equal to controller for now. The next thing that I want to be able to do is we're going to, oops, I have a typo there. The next thing we want to do is reset this controller. Remember we added the word controller on the end of that? So what we want to be able to do is set our entire namespace here. So we're going to say backslash app backslash controllers, and then we're going to do a backslash, but now this backslash, because of the nature of backslash, is actually negating this single quote here. So we're going to do another backslash, so that'll effectively be the backslash. I don't know why either my equals key's not working or I'm just not pushing it hard enough. All right, and then so now we have this, and we're going to actually concatenate on UC words, which is a built-in PHP function that's going to uppercase the beginning of each word. So we're going to pass our controller in there, which will take that blog string and make it capital. And then what we're going to do is we're going to concatenate on the word controller, and that will be uppercase C right here. So now let's go ahead and save and refresh, and we should have the full namespaced blog controller. So app backslash controllers backslash blog, and then we have that word controller there. And that's all coming from this right here. So if I change this to, let's change this to admin or something, then it's going to look for the app controller's admin controller. Okay, so that's how we're going to find that controller by the URL string here. Okay, so the next thing that we want to do, so we have that controller set up. Let's just go ahead and put a comment right here and put set controller. The next thing that I want to do is I want to set up my action. So set action. So the first thing we want to do is our exploded URL parts here, we don't want the beginning to be the blog anymore. We don't need that controller. I said blog. We don't need the controller name anymore. So what we can do is do an array shift, which removes the first element of the array. So array shift, and then we're going to pass in URL parts. And so now URL parts is going to be whatever is left in the URL. So the first element now is going to be this index. So let's go ahead and just make sure I'm not lying about that. And let's var dump our URL parts just like that, and we will refresh here. And now you can see I have one element in that array, and it's index. So it's going to be, the action part's going to be very similar to the way that we set up our controller. So we're going to say action is equal to, now we have to check for that empty again, because what if they didn't put this index part? What if they only put blog right here, and they didn't put index? Well, we want to have something there so that we have index, okay? So the way we're going to do that is the same way. We're going to say if not empty, URL parts 0, and that's going to take the first element of that, and then we're going to, if it's not empty, then we want to set it to that. So if they have something typed in there like index, we want to set it to index, or anything else they put in there. Else, we're going to use our config setting, and we're going to choose our default, what would I call that? Actually, you know what, we're not going to use, we're just going to assume the index action. So we're just going to do else index. All right, the next thing that we want to do is we're going to set our action name equal to action, just so we have a copy of that. And then we're going to concatenate onto our action the word action, like this, because we want all of our methods inside of our controllers to have index action, foo action, right? So we're concatenate on the word action onto whatever that is. So now let's go ahead and var dump the word action. Save and refresh, and now I have index action. Okay, and if I would put up here foo, then we have foo action, okay? So now we know not only the controller name, the controller that needs to be instantiated, but we also know the action inside of that we want to call. So it's going to call one of these methods inside of our controller. So it can either call the index action or the foo action. All right, so now that we have that, let's go back to our router. And then again, at the end of this, what we're going to do is we're going to, one more time, we're just going to do the array shift, and we're going to get rid of the first element of this. Now, anything that's left over in here, we're going to assume that those are parameters, okay? And so what we can do is let's just var dump those URL parts, and I'll show you what I mean. All right, and we'll refresh, and right now we have an empty array, but if I were to put a /34 here, then we have an array with the first element being 34, and we can add as many of these as we want in here. So like say 54. Now we have an array with 34 and 54. All right, so that's going to be what's left over, and we can actually take whatever's left over and pass it in as parameters here in these actions. So that's just in case we need those. We don't have to do that. I'm just showing you how we would do that, and we will do that. Oops. All right, so now let's go and what else? Let's do one more thing here, and we'll probably call it a well, I don't know. We'll see how much time we have left. So underneath this array shift here, what we're going to do here now is we're going to instantiate our controller class. So we're going to say controller class is equal to new, and then we're going to use a variable here, new controller, like this. And then what we need to pass into that is our controller name and our action name. So controller and then action name. And now we have our controller class. So let's go ahead and var dump that controller class. Now this controller class, remember we had to pass that controller and action name in as the first and second parameters, which is why we were passing that in here. So this controller is dynamic, right? So let's just now see what happens. Now, as long as I have blog here and index that are actually legitimate, then when I hit enter here, we can say, oh, there's an object. And the object is a blog controller, and it has these private parameters where the string of blog and the action name is index. And then we don't have anything set yet for the view and the request. So this is exactly what we wanted here. So that's perfect. So the next thing that we want to do, so we have this, but we want to call that method. Well, there's a function that PHP gives us. It's really cool, a little hard to understand, but it's call_user_func_array. And what this is going to allow us to do is we're going to pass in an array, and the first element in that array is the class that you want to call. So we're going to call our controller class. The next parameter, or the next element in this array we want to call is our action. So this action is going to be the name, so it's this right here. That's going to be the name of that we're calling. Now, this needs two, so it takes an array as the first parameter, and that's going to have the controller class. So this is the instantiated controller, and then we're calling the method right here. And then as the second parameter, we can pass all the parameters that we want to pass to this action right here, this method. We can pass that in. Now remember, that's just whatever's left over in URL parts. So that's how that works. So now this is we're instantiating the class here, and then we're gonna call the method with this call user func array. So let's go ahead now and let's get rid of these 2 lines of code and hit save. And we'll go back and refresh now, and it says, yay, you made it to the index action. But what happens now if we put foo in here? And now it says you made it to the foo action. Let's go ahead and try one more thing. And let's go to the blog controller, and let's just try one of these parameters. So I'm going to put a param1 here, and a param1 and a param2. And inside this die, let's just say, let's go ahead and print out param1 space, and we'll print out param2. Oops, like this. Now if we go back and refresh, it says let's go back to the index here. Now this is going to complain because it needs arguments, because we set this action up to take 2 arguments. So we need to give it 2 arguments in the URL. So the first argument will be, let's just say arg1/arg2, and hit enter. And now it says you made it to the index action, exclamation point, arg1 and arg2. So now we have access inside that method to these individual elements as separate arguments. So the way that would work in real life is you'd probably put some sort of ID here. So it'd be 1, 2, 3, and you might put something else here like, you know, what page you're trying to view or something, right? So now you have that inside of your method that you can use. Now we're just dying right now, which doesn't make much sense, but that's how that works. So we made it to the end here of our route function. Now what happens if we do something crazy, like we put a controller that doesn't exist here, like test, and we hit enter? Well, now we have a fatal error, and it says that this class doesn't exist because it's looking for a test controller. Well, we don't have a test controller. So in the next video, what we're going to do is we're going to use some try-catch blocks inside of this route method just to make this die a little more gracefully and give us good error messages as developers to tell us exactly why it's dying, or why there's a fatal error. So we'll do that just to make it a little bit better, and then we will move on with the application. So I hope you guys are enjoying this so far. Please comment, like, subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video. First thing I'm going to do is we're going to go ahead and do a git status here, and we need to do a git add, git commit, and we're going to say route method working, and we will do a git push, which I need to do a git push set upstream origin v8 to add this to my GitHub account. And then now we have that. So now I'm just going to check out my main branch, and I'm going to do a git merge v8, and then I'll do a git push to put that back on my main. Alright guys, well that's it. I will see you in the next video. Peace out.